Welcome to our first set of breakouts for ICTforAg 2020. This session, Digitizing Points of Contact During COVID, will look specifically at how so many organizations have improved farmer transactions by removing physical components. These examples will look at how points of contact have been digitized to protect the farmers and others all around the agricultural value chain.
Hi, my name is Annie Steed. I am the Acting Governance and Economic Growth Office Director at USAID Tajikistan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bola Adeshogo. I'm a professor at the University of Florida, and I'm the director of the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Livestock Systems. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Connor Mullally. I'm an agricultural economist and assistant professor at the University of Florida. I'm a member of the USAID Livestock Lab Management Team and principal investigator on the Nepal REACH grant funded by the USAID Livestock Lab.
So hello, everyone, again. I'm very honored to be the director of the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Livestock Systems at the University of Florida. And Feed the Future is the US government's global food security and hunger alleviation initiative. And our innovation lab is one of about 21 in the US that is working with partners in the developing world to alleviate global hunger and malnutrition and poverty. The vision of our particular lab is to sustainably intensify livestock production in order to improve the nutrition, the health, the incomes, and the livelihoods of the poor. And we work in 8 countries, 2 in South Asia and 6 in Africa. We're funded by USAID and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And these donors have invested in us because they have recognized the vital importance of animal source foods. And this is not just about the protein that they contain, but it's also the micronutrients that are really bioavailable, much more so than most plant sources. Therefore, they are ideal for preventing malnutrition problems in infants, particularly in the first 1,000 days. So we manage and lead 45 field-to-fork research for development projects in our focal countries, and we have about 63 international partners that we work with. We've developed over 40 innovations in our countries, and some of these are ICTforAg type technologies. And today you will have the opportunity to listen to one of my colleagues who leads one of the projects in Nepal. So with that, Connor, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Bola. Today I'm going to be discussing joint work with Heifer International's office in Nepal, as well as Nicholas Magnan at the University of Georgia and Sarah Jansen at the University of Illinois. To give you a little bit of background on our work, we think about the challenge of small farmers marketing through cooperatives. Small farmers face high costs of doing business. They're dispersed over wide areas. They have access to poor infrastructure. And that can make it difficult for them to engage potentially profitable markets, such as selling to urban areas. It's difficult for them, and it's also expensive for intermediaries to deal with individual small producers. So in theory, cooperatives can overcome some of these problems by allowing small producers to sell in bulk, which is going to decrease the cost of doing business with small producers and perhaps make them more appealing for intermediaries who sell into relatively high value urban markets, while also raising the bargaining power of small producers, which might allow them to increase the prices they receive and their corresponding revenues. But if you allow cooperatives to manage marketing rather than coordinating sales among individual farmers, there's no guarantee that this is going to be successful. You've moved the coordination problem from intermediaries to cooperatives, and now cooperatives face the problem of how to coordinate their members to sell in bulk. This is a particularly challenging problem in rural areas of developing countries where infrastructure is poor, and that may inhibit the flow of information and the ability to coordinate. So why am I describing these characteristics of marketing for small producers and marketing through cooperatives? Well, I'm currently the principal investigator on a USAID funded project in which, along with Heifer International, we are testing an intervention meant to improve the ability of cooperatives to market meat goats in Nepal through the use of ICTs. So our study involves 92 cooperatives distributed through the western, midwestern areas of Nepal, if you're familiar with that country at all. And in these cooperatives, most have low rates of participation in joint sales. Information about joint sales is not well targeted. So there isn't really any correlation between who is likely to sell goats and who knows about joint sales offered by cooperatives. So what we did is we developed an app that we call the Virtual Collection Center. It's Android based and it's specialized for the purpose of cooperative goat marketing. And what this app does is it allows cooperatives to collect data on inventory available from their members, which they can then use to negotiate sales with traders. And then they can turn around and use the app to coordinate sales by inviting members to join sales until they can ensure that they can meet the demand of a particular trader. So here's just a little bit of the app interface, although we're currently working on improving the app and simplifying the interface. So if you are one of the cooperative leaders who's in charge of managing this app, or one of the cooperative members in charge of collecting inventory, this is what you would see. Different options for managing cooperative membership, messaging back and forth, collecting inventory data, and inviting producers to sales if you happen to be a cooperative manager. So we think this is a great idea in theory, and it has served some cooperatives well, but challenges remain. First of all, just keeping in the theme of this presentation, it's impossible to digitize all points of contact. You still have to have people bring goats to a market, to a collection center, and there's really no way around that. And our research results to date show that some cooperatives are really power users of the VCC, the Virtual Collection Centers, while others use it rarely, and we're looking into why exactly that is. One reason is that cooperative members are hesitant to provide inventory data because they want to maintain the option of selling individually to private producers. Really, they want a free ride on the higher prices gained by cooperatives through bargaining. So we're trying to deal with this by rewarding information provision with mobile airtime that can be sent through the app. We've also had some problems with SMS. So we're currently piloting an internet version of the app. But the concern there, of course, is that it would make it more of a niche technology, only relevant for cooperatives that have access to good mobile networks. Overall, there's clear demand for technologies that improve the flow of information and improve coordination among the cooperatives. The challenge now is to design a technology that is appropriate. Thank you very much for listening. If you want to see more details on our research, as well as information on another ICTforAg-based randomized control trial that we have going on in Nepal, here are some links.
Thank you for your presentation, Connor. Very clear and very interesting work. You talked about how some of the cooperatives were power users and others did hardly use the app. Do you know any of the underlying reasons for that difference?
So one thing we've noticed is it seems to be correlated with geography. So in the lowland areas of Nepal, you find higher concentrations of the cooperatives that use the app quite a bit versus the mountainous areas. And what that's probably doing is just picking up quality of the mobile network infrastructure, because there isn't really a correlation between how successful the cooperatives are in marketing goats and how much they use the app. It really seems to be driven mostly by geography. That would be my response to that.
That's interesting, and that's a tough one because there's no easy fix for that, right?
No. And what's unfortunate is that the cooperatives that are located in districts with rough terrain are really the ones that need the most help coordinating sales.
Yeah.
When you ask the cooperatives how they coordinate sales in the absence of this app, there's a lot of heterogeneity in quality. At the high end, they try to call around and collect inventory information. At the low end, they will just like blow a whistle and say that the trader is coming. So if you're not located close to the cooperative office, you just have to rely on word of mouth, and that might not get to you.
Right.
You talked about giving them airtime in the updated version of the app. Is that something you've tried? Is that something that seems to be working?
So we're doing a pilot right now with 4 cooperatives. The peak season for goat sales in Nepal basically starts in September and then runs through November during festival seasons. This was a good time to do a pilot. It's too early to reach any conclusions about that other than the fact that we got it operational. So it is feasible to have this incentive structure. One of the issues I didn't mention when I was describing challenges is it's not just the members who don't want to part with their inventory information all the time, but it's also the people who had been charged by the cooperative with collecting the information. Unsurprisingly, people don't like to do more work for free.
So really interesting technology, and it's also interesting how it's been adopted by some, but not by others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it has a lot of relevance to many other countries. I wonder if you could just very briefly summarize the other ICT4App technology that you've developed, please.
Sure. So that project is also joint work with the other researchers I mentioned, as well as Heifer International in Nepal. So working with about 50% of the cooperatives involved in the VCC study, as well as about another 50 additional cooperatives. We're doing an evaluation of a hybrid distance learning platform for community animal health workers. So each of these cooperatives, if possible, has one or more members of its group trained to work as community animal health workers. They're kind of at the bottom of the hierarchy of animal health services in Nepal, as they tend to be in other countries that have community animal health workers doing basic services like castrations, deworming, etc. To become one of these community animal health workers, you have to go live at a training center for a little bit over a month, which can be too much of an obstacle for women, particularly in Nepal and elsewhere in South Asia, where there are a lot of restrictions on mobility, and you're expected to prioritize household responsibilities. So what we've done is reduce the amount of time you need to spend at a training center by about 3/4, and replacing that time with studying at home using the same government-approved curriculum that you'd use at a training center, but delivered through an Android tablet, also with other media other than just the text that you would have if you were studying at a training center. So that study is also ongoing. We just concluded a pilot of a follow-up survey that we're doing by phone, and we'll be working on the real survey in the next couple of weeks. What we can say now is that based on a randomization where training candidates put forward by cooperatives are either randomly invited to do traditional training or randomly invited to do distance learning, the distance learners have a higher completion rate of training, and the difference is going from 29% completion in the traditional training group to 52% completion in the distance learning group. Basically, everybody who signs up finishes training. So really, it seems like the main barrier is if you think training is out of reach because of these mobility restrictions, you don't even bother to try.
Okay.
So again, another
Great.
very interesting technology that is already showing tremendous promise for Nepal and hopefully for beyond. So thank you very much, Connor.
Thank you for the questions.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about how our mission has adjusted its programming to support SMEs and prevent market disruptions during COVID-19. Tajikistan's private sector makes up about 30% of the GDP. Similar to other countries in the world, business owners in Tajikistan are experiencing significant challenges due to coronavirus. Many companies have been unable to maintain full-scale operations due to the decreased demand and disruption of supply linkages. The majority of the country's entrepreneurs are farmers, traders, or agriculture service providers, and they all rely heavily on imports such as fertilizers, pesticides, and seeds, which were immediately affected by border closures. Our first step to support these MSEs were to support Tajikistan's border stations to help keep the import-export corridors open. We worked with the Tajik Chamber of Commerce to set up a trade information hotline center, and this helped the exporters mitigate the adverse effects of the constantly changing border restrictions. By the end of September, 145 companies had used this hotline. With our partners, we helped launch an online freight portal to serve as a matchmaking service to help exporters find transportation to deliver their products to different countries. The platform was a breakthrough for many exporters who were unable to locate affordable transport companies to move their goods, even before the pandemic hit. And we expect it to be used long after COVID restrictions have relaxed. At the onset of the pandemic, in-person meetings were canceled, pretty much the same as all over the world, including large-scale events such as trade fairs. So to fill the gap, we helped the Hotlan Business Association develop a website so that they could still reach their customers, they could gain new customers, and offer services. To catalyze trades and promote horticulture products, we developed an online directory of Central Asia horticulture producers to serve as an online trade fair. This website highlights the products offered by over 120 growers in Central Asia, and it's updated weekly. It gives transportation cost estimates from cities in the region to major global destinations. And it includes an export guide for horticulture goods for Central Asia countries, outlining all the necessary export and certification procedures. To support the smallholder farmers, our programs quickly transformed to all field events into virtual training sessions. Our food security program started using innovative video conference technologies to provide technical assistance to those with access to the internet. And through webinars and online training, we were able to reach our beneficiaries through spring planting and fall harvest. In rural areas where internet isn't always available, we used applications such as Viber and WhatsApp to connect to rural farmers. We used training materials we sent by email to local technicians who then facilitated the training sessions. We were able to build the local capacity this way as well, which was an extra bonus. And our programs created training videos and webinars on topics such as land governance, cold storage facility management, export promotion, and international food safety standards. And to ensure that businesses had access to finance, our programs worked with the financial institutions to develop and advertise online loans and loan products to support the MSMEs. We facilitated business-to-business virtual matchmaking activities to connect producers with traders, exporters, and buyers. The risks associated with exporting goods increased substantially. So we started looking for ways to reduce those risks so that the farmers would still be able to export. We brought several growers together to form an export group, and we provided them with virtual training on new production techniques and helped increase their yields and improve the quality of the produce. So with guidance from USAID, the export group shipped their products to the Baltic states. And despite the border delays and other COVID-related challenges, the export group was still able to make a profit. So this served as a model for the other farmers that gave hope to other exporters that were hesitant to ship their goods during the pandemic. Another concern we had was whether or not we could catalyze business startups at a time when no one wanted to invest for fear of what would happen tomorrow. As early as March, our programs had already hosted 9 regional online technology webinars for over 400 participants as part of a business accelerator style masterclass. Our project partners developed online IT platforms and have transformed all in-person IT courses to online courses. USAID supported a partnership between an IT academy and a business accelerator to train over 500 people in programming and IT skills, and then help those people find jobs for their or start their own businesses. So jobs have always been scarce in Tajikistan, so the need for job creation is more acute now than ever, as many Tajiks are unable to migrate outside the country for work. So COVID isn't over, and I believe everyone now realizes that we need to be creative as we move forward. All of our programs continue to adopt innovative methods to reach our beneficiaries and support the agriculture sector in Tajikistan. So thank you.
Annie, I enjoyed your presentation, and I was really taken by how you were able to continue to deploy in the midst of COVID, particularly in the rural areas. And you talked about using Viber and WhatsApp where the internet penetration was weak. How did you reach those farmers who did not have WhatsApp and Viber?
Yeah, so that's a good question, actually. What we did was there were some times when the technical expert, the local technical expert, was able to go out to the field with his phone, and that person was able to, actually the international expert would call in, and the local expert would have the phone there so that the farmers could see the presentation through the phone and still connect with the people that it was coming from.
Okay.
So it was a little bit of a challenge logistically, and of course everybody took COVID precautions, 2 meters apart, masks, and took care not to. They were just very careful.
Okay, great. So Annie, thank you very much for an enlightening presentation and all the work you're doing out there in challenging times.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the session, Digitizing Points of Contact with Connor, Annie, and Bola. We have a special additional piece to add to this conversation. I have my colleague, Ram Dulipala, who is the theme leader of Digital Agriculture and Youth at ICRSA. Ram and I are going to talk a little bit more about the session, how it applies at a South Asian regional context, and how we can scale some of these solutions that came out of the session. So first, I kind of want to start off and just let you all know that Ram and I watched the session and we're very excited to be here and talk more about it. So Ram, I'd love to hear at first your initial reactions to the use cases that Annie and Bola and Connor provided us, and kind of what were your initial reactions and thoughts to that?
Sure. Thanks, Shamaila. Thanks for asking my opinion. Firstly, I think very interesting use cases for very different situations. While the Nepal use case seems to be more organic, I mean, they were trying to use ICTs in a way to bring some capacities to the cooperatives. The Tajikistan case, I think, was more a reaction towards the pandemic. Both fantastic in their own right. But what I found very, I mean, it's a great, they're both great testimonials for use of ICTs in agriculture. I'll tell you why. The Tajikistan case, it's kind of more looks at how to use ICTs to bridge the supply chain failures or the challenges that are being experienced by supply chains on account of pandemic, right? So it kind of operates at a much higher level in the value chain. Vis-a-vis, the Nepal use cases were more about, using ICTs to support something at a micro economic level, so to say, trying to support linkages between meat farmers and meat traders, very low value transactions. So that's the beauty of ICTs. This is probably a technology that is really scale neutral. It can be useful for low value items all the way till very high value, items or transactions as well. So that was my quick reaction.
Yeah, and I guess kind of going off of that a little, in addition to those reactions, were there any questions or kind of remaining thoughts that you had that if you were there and could ask the speakers, you'd want to kind of ask them and learn from them on?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you see, per se, I was trying to look for those commonalities, even though the use cases seem to be vastly different. But I think both the use cases touched upon a very important point, which I think is very it's very relevant for all ICT4Ag practitioners and researchers. No matter how much is the level of digitization or sophistication that you can bring in the tools, essentially, I think the personalization or the human touch point at the last mile, I think that was underscored in both the use cases. For instance, in the case of virtual cooperatives that was demonstrated in Nepal, you had these people, slightly more tech savvy farmers, so to say, who are using digital tools, and they were the custodians of the relationships in the last mile with the farmers, right? Fast forward to Tajikistan, I think that was also demonstrated where in some cases, I think the speaker spoke about course material and curriculum being emailed to some progressive farmers. And it was these progressive farmers who were kind of, doing the dissemination, right? So I think that's the so-called, I think it's called mediated access in some parts of the world, this kind of a model, or in some parts of the world, they also call it as the next user. I think that's probably a very important ingredient in rollout or deployment of any ICT4Ag solutions, in my opinion.
Yeah. There were, you touched on a couple different things that even I saw, which was the similarities and kind of that continued need for that's still the point of contact that is still person to person and human to human. And I think as we kind of move forward and try to understand how to continue working in a pandemic world, or in a world where there is another crisis, another pandemic, that becomes important, because we often think the ICT digital solution is what we need, but there's still so much that comes from having access and having a space for that person-to-person contact, and in making sure that we're doing that in a safe and educated and complemented with ICT solutions manner. So overall, I think I want to step into thinking more about the region broadly, and I know Tajikistan provides kind of an alternative use case from a slightly separate region, and of course Nepal still being within South Asia. I would be curious to hear from you in the work that you do with ICRSAT and iHub. Do these solutions seem like something that could scale, especially in the context of India specifically?
Yeah, definitely, Shamila. You see, from my own experience, from my own reflections as a researcher, as a part-time researcher, and as a part-time practitioner, where day in, day out, we kind of think about how can ICTs bring about the desired transformation, especially in the smallholder context. We realize that ICTs on their own can only do so much. ICTs can catalyze transformation when you have the requisite physical or the social infrastructure, right? To give you to elaborate more on what I mean, for instance, especially in India, I'll speak from India because we are in Hyderabad and we have access to a lot of those that data and information. In some things in India, there are a number of programs or projects that are funded by donors like a USAID or the World Banks, which have invested in something called as rural livelihood missions, right? And this culture of rural, this legacy of investing in rural livelihood missions has been ongoing for probably a decade or a decade and a half, right? So courtesy the rural livelihood mission projects or programs in different states of the India, today you have some kind of a loose social structures wherein you have a lot of, at least in Andhra Pradesh, our neighboring state from Hyderabad, there is a very strong women self-help group movement, right? So where there are over 10,000 or 20,000 women self-help groups. So they all are self-organizing women self-help groups who probably will have some kind of a rep. So in some ways, so today as we are looking at digitalization of agriculture or digitalization of rural economy or providing market linkages to some of these rural economies, what we are figuring out is our digital platforms are actually blending and riding on top of the SHGs that have got institutionalized over a period of time, right? This is a potent combination, and this can really have that desired transformation or transformative effect, in my opinion, right? Similarly, if you look at Bihar also, they have this fantastic rural livelihood mission project. I think it's called the Jivika project, right? I also am aware of a couple of iHub startups that are rolling out their interventions. Again, their models are based on this mediated access model, where you'll have some person in the last mile who will be accessing the digital platform, but they kind of aggregate and collate and coordinate amongst the aggregated farmers, right? So very interesting. I mean, a lot of relevance for India as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And then on that, of course, you talked a little bit about some of the barriers and some of the access issues broadly, but I'd be curious to know, like, if VCC, by the case study presented by Bola and Connor, if that was something that was brought to India, bring it to Andhra Pradesh, but maybe not meet goat markets, but rather with these women self-help groups, or bring it to Bihar and focus more on the rural communities there. Like, what do you think are some of the unique challenges that would be presented in India that may not have been there in Nepal, or that they might have been able to overcome in Nepal?
Some unique challenges. I will speak from my gut here. I already think in some ways what VCC attempted to do is organically happening in India. For instance, especially during pandemic, I've seen numerous case studies where farmers came together on their own, started forming WhatsApp groups or Facebook groups, were coordinating amongst themselves. Like, they were reporting inventory voluntarily. They were identifying someone in the group to use this WhatsApp group as a means to collect, aggregate information about the available produce, and then reaching out prospectively to potential buyers. That is because of pandemic, our traditional marketing channels basically collapsed. So more out of compulsion, farmers organically did what VCC is trying to do in some ways, right? Probably in that sense, I could say that, thanks to, the silver lining of this pandemic is, if VCC were to pilot their idea today, it would be far more receptive now than it would have been without the pandemic.
Yeah, no, that's true. And is there any digital or mobile app-based work or startups, especially, I guess, in iHub and in T-Hub and in Telangana state, that you see that are similar to VCC specifically, or that VCC could collaborate with if entering the Indian market?
Sure. So definitely there are quite a few startups. For instance, this startup called Kuza does that in some ways. It's a slight variant of what VCC is doing, but you'll find a lot of similarities. They also operate on this mediated access model, works on aggregation, training, capacity building, etc., etc. Same is the case. There is another startup called Kalgudi, also does something very similar. See, all these, as I said, this mediated access, I think is a critical enabler for all these ICTforAg businesses, just that they keep pivoting around the business models in different ways.
Yeah. And then I guess a little bit further, so in Tajikistan, ANI and the USAID mission there are focusing specifically on support to SMEs. And of course, we talk a lot about rural communities and farming communities when thinking about India, but similar question, do you see kind of points of collaboration or pre-existing business models that are there to digitize the points of contact for SMEs in India?
Yeah, definitely, Shamaila. The way SMEs, at least ag businesses, work is it's mostly personal relationships that kind of define the supply chains from farm to fork. But I think bringing on digital platforms will bring in a lot of traceability, can bring in a lot of positive behavior, will reinforce a lot of positive behavior, and will lead to a lot of efficiencies, at a systemic level. And it will ultimately, the benefits at a systemic level, if managed well, can translate into higher income and prosperity for smallholder farmers as well.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to see how I guess the question for me often is COVID has brought on this new opportunity for a lot of new ICT solutions, especially when we think about the points of contact, the access to market, access to aggregator across the food and agriculture supply chain. But what my brain is constantly thinking about is, okay, so we have all these solutions right now. They've come up, they've been there in the last year. How viable are these solutions post-pandemic? How much do you think that they're going to remain or still be able to kind of exist in the context that they were created in?
Sure. So to be very honest with you, I kind of restate it slightly. These are not new technologies, but I think we just figured out new ways of using these technologies for doing things what we were doing in the past. And I think this time the change is for real. It's going to remain. Probably, there might be a good chunk of population that might just go back to their earlier ways of doing business once we are past the pandemic. But I am reasonably sure there will also be a significant percentage of the people who really figured out that, okay, this really does make my life easier. And it is some of these early adopters who will probably, continue to use the digital platforms. And I think these are the trendsetters, so to say, who will probably pull along a lot of the laggards as well into a more digital agriculture age.
Yeah. We can keep our fingers crossed and hope that's the case.
I hope so too. So we just have to find a silver lining.
Yeah, that is true. I have one more kind of big final thought, and then I think we want to open it up to the continued conversation in the Whova chat and really allow others to also say what's on their mind as they listen to the session. But my final question for you, Ram, is thinking more about ICT4Ag as a conference and thinking about this session, digitizing points of contact during COVID-19. We saw a couple use cases of access points in which digital solutions have been built out or used to kind of solve the pressing issue. Are there other points of contact within the agricultural supply chain and the value chain that you think could also use digital solutions? If so, what are some of those other points of contact that our trendsetters and entrepreneurs should really be building ICT solutions for?
Sure, that's a great question. I personally think, one is, of course, digitizing the points of contact with the farmers. But I think, retailers, see, end of the day, farmers buy a significant chunk of their produce or, a lot of their groceries, etc., from a nearby retail store. Probably I'm kind of making an assumption that it's the same retail store that also caters to the agricultural inputs or probably their own groceries, etc., right? So somewhere I think we also have to think of looping in some of these incumbent retail small businesses, so to say, because end of the day, I think most of us realize the real challenge of digitizing or nudging the farmers away from retailers to buy or sell to a completely different party, right? So if that is the real insurmountable challenge, why can't we flip the question and say, okay, why do I want to disturb the last mile relationship between the farmer and the local retailer? After all, the retailer also has been serving the smallholder for some time, and he has some interests in the success of the smallholder farmer as well, right? So maybe we also kind of start thinking of this local retailer more as a partner, and then thinking of how do I disrupt the supply chain that is leading up to this retailer, rather than trying to do away with that last mile retailer and kind of trying to solve too many problems, which makes it a very big challenge. I mean, this is kind of a very this is a strange thought that I've kind of been thinking about for some time.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the very well said, and also just the beauty of even having this type of a back and forth discussion after a session is a lot of that immediate kind of thought and how do we apply these use cases, how do we apply these solutions to other contexts, and in the work that we do is a very important part of this. Ram, thank you so much for joining us for this brief but jam-packed kind of extended session here for ICT4Ag. I think my request to all of the audience listening in is, of course, to continue reaching out if you have any specific India or South Asia specific questions and ideas. You can always reach out to Ram Doolittle himself to kind of provide the perspective from ICRSAT and also innovators across India specifically. Thank you for joining us, and for everyone else, please continue to put your questions and your ideas and your thoughts in the chat. Like I had said at the beginning, the purpose of this extended session, as I keep calling it, was really to show you all that the use cases and the ICT solutions that we'll explore and have already been exploring throughout the ICT4Ag conference are being actively thought about, actively responded to, and built out as we go through this conference. And this is just one glimpse of how Ram, someone who's viewed the session and looked at these use cases, is thinking about this work and hoping to apply it. So we hope that you all are also actively thinking about it and actively applying it to your ideas and your work. Thanks so much for joining us, and please get ready to head over to the next session.
Thanks, Shamila.
So, what did you think of Breakout Block 1? We hope that you all are enjoying the content that we have for you here at ICT4Ag 2020. I know it's a virtual world. I know your fingers are probably really tired of having to type all those messages, but don't worry, we're going to have some social hours and some breaks and some time to network for you all. But first, let's head to our next block of breakouts just here on Whova.
Because I think ICT4Ag is one discipline or one area which is pretty much is evolving, right? So this is a science that's being made as we speak, and I feel very privileged that we as a community of people are actually defining this space. We are kind of riding the cusp, and we are kind of creating a lot of the standards, and we are laying down the path of how this area is eventually going to evolve and start impacting smallholder farmers in particular in a very big way, and thus help the world at large address a number of the sustainable development goals.
At the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, ICT4Ag is a key part of our overall strategy. We have a team called Digital Farmer Services, and we see digital as a way to accelerate inclusive agricultural transformation. We focus on different aspects of the digital farmer services spectrum, from ag advisory to insurance, to finance, market linkages. We also look at the broader digital agriculture ecosystem, which I think is an important part of why we're here at this conference, is to have a coordinated approach to how do we scale these systems, how do we reach the millions of farmers that we need to reach through digital.
First, we think to use the ICT will help us also to help farm to provide the better nutrition, better productivity, a better environment, and a better living standard for smallholder farmers and family farmers, and also to better provide the technical support to FAO's members.
So for the World Bank, what ICT4Ag represents is really charting the course for the next years of our engagement with our clients, promoting digital methodologies and also disruptive agri-tech innovations, in which we can collaborate with local innovation entrepreneurs, youth, agri-tech startups, all these people who can bring new life, new blood, passion, and innovation in how our food and agriculture system should go in the future. So we look forward to connecting with you. We look forward to collaborate with you, and yeah, come and let's change the course of the system together.
Hi, I'm Angela Pashayan. I'm an intern at USAID in the Inclusive Development Division under Meredith Soul. And food security, to me, means when we are able to have food delivered in crisis, in COVID situations or other pandemics, to places that look like this, the informal settlements in Africa.
Resiliencia en la agricultura, creo que la entendí. Creo que ese es un tema de mucha actualidad donde creo que cada día es de más aprendizaje porque creo que nosotros los humanos hemos dañado la naturaleza y creo que ahora la naturaleza está cobrándonos factura. Tenemos que prepararnos mucho para hacer agricultura resiliente. Ese es un tema de mucha actualidad.
What does food resilience mean to me? It means that waking up in the morning, I don't have to think about whether I'm looking for food or not. I mean, it's just there. I don't have to think about it. The food is always available. Thank you.
Of not worrying about food. And I really love these kinds of conversations because you see so much creativity in addressing food security around the world and how so many different areas utilize similar strategies, but also very different strategies to really respond to their specific population targets. And I think it's a very sad issue, but also a very beautiful solution-based issue that a lot of people are working towards. I think it's incredible, like coalition of individuals.
Je pense que c'est la capacité d'avoir un accès aux aliments de meilleure qualité et de manière durable. Ça, je pense que ça, c'est la sécurité alimentaire. Avoir accès aux aliments de meilleure qualité, n'est-ce pas, et de manière durable. Je pense que c'est ça ma compréhension de la sécurité alimentaire. Merci.
This April, we launched the USA Digital Strategy, which applies to all of USA programs and sectors and regions around the world, including agriculture. So when you have a chance, please go check out the USA Digital Strategy.
And please remember to go to the topic-specific community discussion boards and start your topic or engage with others.
Don't forget, you can also reach out to people one-on-one using the direct message function.
Hi, everybody. Don't forget that we have session chats where you can post your questions and communicate and connect with other participants throughout the day.